Airbus and Air France just learned that the pilots made mistakes is no longer a legal shield. On Thursday, a Paris appeals court found both aviation giants guilty of corporate manslaughter over the 2009 crash of Flight 447, a verdict that overturns 17 years of legal defense and marks the first time manufacturers have been held criminally responsible for a commercial aviation disaster where pilot error was also a factor. This isn't just about one crash. This is about whether the companies that build and operate planes can point to what happened in the cockpit and walk away. For decades, that's exactly what they did. And for the 228 people who died when AF 447 plunged into the Atlantic on June 1, 2009, it looked like it would happen again. Until Thursday. Here's what actually happened that night. The Airbus A330 was flying from Rio to Paris, cruising at 35,000 feet over the Atlantic, when its Pitot tubes, the small external sensors that measure airspeed, iced over in a storm. The autopilot, suddenly blind to how fast the plane was moving, disconnected. The flight controls degraded to a backup mode. The captain was on a scheduled rest break. The two co-pilots, now flying manually in the dark over the ocean, pulled the nose up. It was the wrong move. The plane stalled, and for 4 minutes it fell, nose up, until it hit the water. Everyone on board was killed. Investigators recovered the black boxes 2 years later from the ocean floor. The data showed the pilots had made critical errors. Airbus and Air France built their defense on that fact. In 2022, when the case finally went to trial, both companies pleaded not guilty. Their argument was simple: the pilots had the information they needed, they were trained, and they made the wrong choice. A lower court agreed. In April 2023, both companies were acquitted. The judge found they had made mistakes, but couldn't prove those mistakes caused the crash. Prosecutors appealed. And this week, the appeals court came to a different conclusion. The judges didn't dispute that the pilots made errors. They ruled that Airbus and Air France created the conditions that made those errors inevitable. Specifically, the court found that Airbus had failed to address a known problem with the Pitot tubes, and Air France had failed to properly train its pilots to handle a high-altitude stall when automation failed. Both failures, the court said, met the threshold for criminal negligence. The Pitot tube detail is the key. An Associated Press investigation revealed that Airbus had known about problems with those sensors since at least 2002. The type installed on Flight 447, the Thales C16195AA model, had malfunctioned multiple times on other flights. Airbus had issued recommendations to replace them, but it wasn't mandatory, and airlines moved slowly. Air France had scheduled the replacement for Flight 447's aircraft, but only after it returned to Paris. The plane never made it. The training failure is just as damning. The court found that Air France's pilots weren't adequately prepared to manually recover from a high-altitude stall after an autopilot disconnect. The co-pilots on Flight 447 held the nose up for nearly the entire descent, a mistake that contradicts basic stall recovery. But under pressure, in the dark, with conflicting warnings and the captain absent for most of the crisis, they never corrected it. The airline, the court ruled, should have seen that gap and fixed it. Each company was fined €225,000, the maximum allowed under French law. It's a tiny amount for corporations of this size. Airbus had revenues of over €65 billion in 2025. But the money isn't the point. The verdict is. For the first time, a court has said that when a plane crashes, you can't just point at the pilots and stop investigating. You have to look at what the manufacturers knew, what the airlines trained, and what both of them chose not to fix. Both Airbus and Air France have announced they will appeal to France's highest court, the Court of Cassation. That process could take years. But the legal precedent is already set. Other cases are watching. Families of crash victims and other disasters are paying attention. Because this verdict does something the industry has resisted for decades, it puts the companies that design and operate these systems in the same room as the consequences when those systems fail. 17 years ago, 228 people from 33 countries boarded a flight that should have been routine. What happened in those 4 minutes over the Atlantic was a cascade: ice, sensors, automation, training, decisions. The court didn't say the pilots were blameless. It said the companies weren't either. And that difference just changed the future of aviation accountability.